All right, welcome to the Backroads Podcast. My name is Ryan, and we thank you for joining us on Season 1, Episode 6. We are trying to still figure out ideal audio as we do deliveries. We do a lot of our podcasts on the road, so if you hear some background noise or clicking and that sort of thing, we do our best to take it out. But to the event you hear it, that's probably why. We use our windshield time as wisely as possible and record audio sessions as appropriate and with when it's safe to do so. Again, while we're already out making deliveries and that sort of thing. So we're coming into the second week of April now, and we have really had a large amount of plants in the ground. We've got our corn, beans, peas, turmeric, Jerusalem artichokes, cabbage, marigolds already in. We got corn and wheatgrass. We have zucchini and pumpkin started. Those are going to go. We got tomatoes. However, we didn't have the heat mats down, so those have really struggled without the heat mat, even in the growing rooms. So I probably should have had those a little bit warmer. We do have the cucumbers in. We're going to be doing more cucumbers and summer squash. Some of that is experiencing root rot because it's been root bound. We've had a number of delays planting our the rest of our grapes and that sort of stuff, simply because we have to really, watch for that frost danger. We put a lot of our stuff on pallets, and then we're moving them in and out of the pole barn of our barn dominium, and it's been a real struggle. A lot of this stuff has definitely struggled as we attempt to, make everything grow as nice as possible. We lost a few rows of corn. We did build some low tunnels, 4-foot low tunnels, and we'll be using those and switching those over and transitioning. We did plant, 5.5 rows of potatoes under the dirt and under wood chips. So we're trying that combo. I've never planted this much in my life. I've never had this of much of an ambitious goal while also, working the other businesses and doing what we're doing. And that's, primarily because we're in uncertain times and we need to have as many options as possible. And when we're growing food, we have more options. We do have some peppers too that we started. I got the hot peppers ready to be planted, and we got to start some sweet peppers as well. My wife really likes the sweet peppers. We got a lot of onions down, Egyptian walking onions, as well as red and white onions. We didn't get the garlic in, so I'm not sure if I'm going to plant that late and let it go to seed or let it bolt and see what it does. That might be worth trying, planting it out of the ideal season and then trying again in fall. But we should have low tunnels and maybe even some high tunnels set up by the time fall comes around. So we should be able to plant year round going forward. And that's going to be a big, bonus to what we're trying to do. We have the water systems getting started. So the black water tank, got a 2,500 gallon tank, as well as, of course, our well water. And, we measured the depth of our well to see how much headroom we have. We have plenty. I don't know how old that well pump is. So if we can, we'll try to set aside some money for that. Our neighbors at White Rock Homestead just replaced their well. It went out. And the cost is, many thousands of dollars, not only for the pump, but the extraction equipment to get the piping out, because most of our wells are, 200 feet plus in the ground here in the Ozark Mountains. So those are, you're trying to anticipate what hardships you're going to try to overcome with a limited budget. You're trying to anticipate how to live a more sustainable life through a networking community of other homesteaders. And we continue to grow that and learn how to do things. Last week, we learned how to process rabbits at White Rock's Homestead. And we do have 12 chickens that we just got. And we modified our chicken coop to become a chicken tractor. If you haven't watched that video, you can check it out on our blog. That was quite the experience of revamping a decrepit old coop that was here and revitalizing it as best we could. The birds are doing good. We have, anticipation of, lots of eggs. We do have a freeze dryer, so we do preserve a lot of our food in that fashion. We can also, my wife does have the canning stuff, so we do can quite a bit, or we did can. before we moved down here to Arkansas from Wisconsin, and we continue to do that. So I guess going back to the rabbit thing, when we start homesteading, what are we looking to do? As we talk about profitability and sustainability, designing a homestead that is, has the lowest cost possible. And if most people start with chickens, what I've just learned is that's like step 2. Step 1 would be to, plant your garden, get your garden so you got your garden scraps going, and start with some rabbits. Meat rabbits are one of the most sustainable, even though each rabbit, you're at 3 to 5 pounds for meat rabbits. They do replenish themselves quite quickly. They're a low maintenance animal, and they're relatively easy to process. So that's one of the things that we kind of messed up on. We should have started with rabbits instead of chickens, but the chicks are just starting, so we could probably get some meat rabbits, put some rabbit tractors together. We do have enough to build at least one more tractor. And we were going to get meat birds, but maybe we'll get meat rabbits and then have our breeding cages and such for those rabbits. And again, you want to process rabbits so that the meat and organs and byproducts of the rabbit can be fed to the chickens as their protein source. Your vegetables and things that come out of the garden can be fed to the chicken for the rest of their nutritional needs, and then you supplement with feed. Commonly what happens with folks who start a homestead, they get chickens and goats, and they start out with a lot of animals before having a way to feed those animals. And then they realize that for the milk that they're getting and cheese and butter and all the stuff, it's expensive because you don't have a good stable feeding mechanism for those animals. And so if you have to continue to buy those things, a lot of folks are going to be, they get disheartened with the fact that it's more expensive to homestead. And as feed prices continue to go up with the rest of inflation, and what's happening just before we hit the depression here, that's my opinion. I think that we're going to hit a depression, but maybe we won't. But the way they're printing dollars and the way that the economies of the world are changing and how the West is being viewed and how the petrodollar, the U.S. dollar, is losing its ground as the world currency, it is, something we have to consider. As homesteaders, as Americans, we have to try and do things to prepare to offset the value of the dollar. They're going to try to devalue the dollar. They've been doing that. And, just last week, they announced that they're going to be doing multiple interest rate drops, which is going to expedite the inflation issue. And now that the Fed pretty much said, well, inflation's here to stay, we're just going to deal with it. We're not, 8%'s fine. We thought we could get her down to 2 to 3%, but we lied, just like everything else. And so these are all economic factors that as homesteaders, we have to take into consideration. And so setting up our business plans are going to be essential for sustainability, and adjusting with the market and how your community around you accepts what it is that you're doing, participates in what you're doing. Those are going to be key factors to consider. Also protecting what it is you're building. The larger of an operation you become, the more of a target you become, both politically and possibly even from a violence standpoint. If you have something and your neighbor is starving and you can't provide for them, they're going to take what they don't have in some cases. So it's overwhelming to try and think about all of these different factors, but it's more overwhelming if you don't do these things and you have no option. So, we live by God's word, and we know that the walls of Babylon are burning, and we're going to do everything we can to better ourselves and mankind and live by the word of God. But God gave us the ability to use our minds and our bodies to do the things. And I think that's where a lot of people, again, they're jumping off the bandwagon of, okay, well, we know this is coming, but if you realize how much work it is to do the things you need to do, it becomes almost impossible to accept all of the different responsibilities in a short amount of time. And that's where the community stuff comes in. We got to be able to reach out to our fellow brothers and sisters in faith in homesteading and sustainability. And the only way to really become self-sufficient and sustainable is to have that community network in there. And trading of goods and services can also be a problem. And our group had played with cryptocurrencies and, obviously the federal dollars. But we also looked at gold and silver. We have, the silver coins and such. Gold, we typically have been using gold backs because it's such a lower, it's a minute amount of gold that is easy to carry like a dollar, like a paper currency, but it is the gold right in the bill. You can melt it down and have a bullion right in your hand. So you're not using a promissory note. It is the actual gold. So we've been buying hundreds of those, and our homesteaders have been buying them, and we're using that as a possible trade network. So these are some of the things. Being able to grow this stuff and trade this stuff and work with people is going to be essential. We also want to emphasize communication. So a lot of us in the Arkansas, Southern Missouri networks are using GMRS radio. GMRS stands for General Mobile Radio Service. The license is like $35, and it's good for the whole household for 10 years. It's a very inexpensive license. You can get up to 50-watt radios. There's repeaters. There's repeater networks. There's linked repeaters. And there's a good way to introduce yourself to off-grid communication with GMRS radios. Homestead to homestead, it depends from a communication standpoint. It depends on how far away you are from one another and your line of sight, because this is, direct radio signals. So GMRS is in the 400 megahertz band, and it can get through some foliage and stuff, but it's not a large wavelength. So it's good for closer communication. If you want to dive into communication that's more wide, you're going to want to look at ham radio. Maybe start with CB. CB is a high frequency HF band in the 11 meters is where that's at. So it's a very long wavelength. So while the audio quality isn't as great, it can travel over greater distances, and it can bounce off, the atmosphere and that kind of stuff. And again, CB you don't, and now CB also, you can use FM on CB. They changed the rules on CBs, making them more viable. But again, you got a wattage limitation, you have radio limitations, and you have frequency limitations, not to mention it's not secure comms. Most of our radio communication is not secure. So those are some of the things we have to consider. Next up, we want to look at first aid, having enough of substantial medical kit and knowledge of how to use tourniquets and that sort of thing. We're going to be potentially on our own here if this thing goes too far south. And so having basic knowledge of how to fix your little boo-boos, scratches, and making sure you have enough antiseptic and ways to treat infection is going to be essential for your homestead. So stock up on those essentials and learn what your natural remedies are for infection prevention and treatment. So like herbalism is a great thing to know. For foraging is a good thing to know. How to make tinctures and how to make tallows, and basically utilizing a lot of the natural remedies that a lot of the modern medicine don't use anymore because you can't sell it. It's not profitable. It's not patentable. These are remedies that human beings have been using for thousands of years, and it has worked. So that's one thing to definitely consider. So kind of giving a breakdown, we'll try to do breakdowns like that through every podcast, or, we try to mention a lot of this stuff because it is important. And whether you're living in an urban environment, rural environment, or somewhere in the middle, connectivity is going to be very important. Working with your neighbors, working with, the folks who see this coming and are going to try and do something about it to protect themselves, their families, their friends, and their community. So Jess and I are also embarking on looking at state nationalism and getting a good education on, natural law, trust law, irrevocable trusts, on statutory trusts, and doing things to put what our investments are and securing them in a way, whereas if the corporation of the United States doesn't exist or goes bankrupt again, that we have some means to protect it outside of statutory code. So those are things to look at. I can try to put some of this stuff in the blog post. So they'll be in the show notes of some resources you can look at, things that we've done. We've used our HSA health savings accounts for like buying medical packs and that kind of stuff, and offsetting some of those costs with benefits from Jess's employer. So there's ways to do a lot of this stuff, and it doesn't have to be scary. It doesn't have to be immediate, but you have to do something. And the more things you can do on your own of whatever your cognitive ability is, basically the stuff we're talking about here can't be learned overnight. These are skills that our generations have lost connection with, and it's going to take some time to rebuild and relearn some of the things that our ancestors knew. So take it day by day. That's again why community is important. When you are struggling, mentally to handle what's happening, it's important to call on your brothers and sisters, your church groups, your focus groups, and if you need some time, utilize your community for that. And there are those of us in our network, in our homestead network, where a lot of times we schedule a time to get together and knock out projects with one another. And sometimes we don't do any of the project, and it turns into a focus session on biblical study or just society and what's happening in the world. And just we use it as a coping mechanism to help one another navigate what's happening in a positive way. It's very unfortunate that a lot of the homestead YouTube channels and such are doomsday, tagline folks. I mean, I get why they do it, because they have to pay the bills, and that gets a lot of views, that negative stuff, the warning stuff. But some of them really don't do a very good job of putting a positive spin on what you can do about it. So we want to, if we start talking about some current events, we definitely want to do it in a way that doesn't instigate fear or negativity or anger. We want to do it in a way that says, okay, we know this is happening. How are we going to pivot as a community, as a homestead, as a family, as a faith and church-based group? How are we going to navigate these obstacles? And doing it together and having clear communication usually executes a positive result. So those are some of the things that we really want to drive home, is building that community and try to not be scornful and negative. Try to not fight with your neighbors. Try to understand where people are coming from. And it's okay to have different ideas and different opinions. You don't have to be enemies to have different ideas. So those are definitely the things that we want to try and consider. Be positive. If you find yourself digging through and scrolling through and looking at news and getting depressed and anxious and you get a tight chest or something, it's highly advised, put down the phone, put down the screen, stop watching the news, get with your community, get more exercise, be positive with your spouse, try and not just, word vomit and emotion dump on your spouse all the time. Try to come up with solutions with your spouse on how to deal with things that are happening. There's going to be a lot of financial strain. There's going to be a lot of emotional strain, and take a deep breath, center yourself, ground yourself, and try and work out a solution without getting excited or upset. We're going to promote that as much as we can on this channel, in these podcasts. We're going to promote it through the comments. We're available on a limited basis through those comments. And, to reach out and be part of a community, again, we're limited in what we can do because our focus is our immediate network of homesteaders and families in faith. But if we can help in any way we can, comments can get away from us. We've learned this through other YouTube channels that we manage. And, when you have 9,000 comments, you just can't realistically get through them all. So those are things that we have to consider. grow your local network, talk with your friends and family and start there, and pray to God, open up that faith communication with your creator. And, amazing things happen when you meditate the word, read the good book, and get away from the digital pollution, the electronics pollution that inundates our lives every day. You will feel better by getting away from that stuff. So we just went through quite a bit of stuff. Again, these are topics we're going to dive into and explore more deeply as the podcast goes on. So if you haven't subscribed to this podcast yet, please download it, hit subscribe on your favorite player. We're on all the major platforms, and we have links to all the major platforms on our podcast page of backroadshomesteading.com. And, you can leave direct messages right there. You can download the MP3 right from our website. You don't have to use any player if you don't want to. And it works great. The email list goes out every week, and, whenever we produce a new thing, you get it in the email all in one nice little package. So that's a great way to do it. Plus, you can respond to those, and I'll respond to you personally if I can. So we're looking forward to getting involved more with the local farmers markets in our area. We're trying to produce food in a way that's marketable. So putting together rows of food by week and putting those market rows put them in a way so that harvesting becomes manageable. These are things that we want to try and accomplish. So it's really exciting to try and put this all together. I mean, it's overwhelming, of course. And I have to take breaks like everybody else. I've been trying to promote positive ways to deal with what's going to be coming and what's happening right now. And it's hard. It's hard to accept that we have so many problems that continue to develop, and our elected leaders can't handle them. They don't represent the people, they represent themselves. And every time they pass things that are not good for the people, it is showing us that the corruption on a federal and state level is a real issue. So, boy, it's a pickle. And, you raise too many red flags and they could get rid of you in a number of different ways. They try to censor you. That's how communism works. It's how a lot of countries suppress freedom of speech. And it's nothing new. It's something that humans have done, again, pretty much since our existence. Those who rise to power will try and control those who don't have power. And it's very, very simple in that regard. So you can actually learn a lot through history because of how that stuff works. I think this is probably a good... We're gonna try to keep these podcasts under 30 minutes long every time. If we do some special guests, we might break it down. If we go over an hour or something, we'll break it into segments. We really want to try and keep these things manageable to listen to within a 30-minute time frame. When you're getting up and you're in the shower or you're driving home from work or whatever, we try to make the podcast episode, convenient to listen to where you can hear it in its entirety in one sitting. So again, like, share, subscribe. We really, really appreciate those who are sharing our podcast. We got quite a few referrals last week, which was really cool to see. So we'll continue to do these podcasts. If there's a certain topic you want us to cover, please post it in the show notes on our podcast page for backroadshomesteading.com/podcast. And we'll definitely dive into a topic if you want us to really hit a certain topic. All right. Thank you for listening. This is the Backroads Homesteading Podcast, Season 1, Episode 6. My name is Ryan, and have a blessed day. Thank you for listening. Stay positive. Stay connected. We'll see you in the next episode.